Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. Our topic today is voice intelligence at workplaces now and the future. We will be discussing a lot about the new buzzword or a lot of new voice technologies. So my name is Jaspreet Kaur, and I'm going to be the moderator. I am a full stack engineer at Costco Wholesale, and I am also the Seattle lead for Women in AI. I am very happy to be part of this amazing community. So just real quick about our topic. So our voice AI experts will discuss different types of voice technologies that are changing the way we work. For example, we will be discussing what are some of the voice AI tools as well as challenges for making those tools more robust. We will also discuss voice AI in the remote work life. Furthermore, from Siri to Alexa, voice intelligence has become a crucial AI domain. Many AI companies are focusing on interpreting voice with the use of technology and taking conversation intelligence to the next level. In the future, voice intelligence will become useful companions or assistants with more powerful chatbots or tools that can filter out the useful information from human conversations and make it more actionable. So with that, let's get into our agenda for today. I will, first of all, I will be introducing our amazing speakers for this panel today. And then we will discuss what voice technologies mean for each speaker's company. I will also ask questions to each of our speakers in round-robin fashion. And then in the end, we will also take a look at some of the questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, please save them till the end. And then we will get into the closing remarks. I'm very excited for that part because there will be some action items on how to get started with the voice technologies in our businesses. And with that, I will go ahead and introduce our first speaker. Her name is Surbhi Rathore. She is the founder and CEO of Symbl AI. And then we have Joan Bajorek. She is the founder and CEO of Women in Voice. And then we also have Milkana. She's the founder and CEO of jargon.com. And let's, first of all, thank you everyone for being here today, for making time from your busy schedules. Let's get into our questions. And my very first question for you three is that you will be answering, each of you will be answering is, please introduce your organizations and then tell us what voice technologies mean for your companies. So I think we will start with you, Surbhi.
Sure, yeah. Hey, everyone. Very nice to be here. I'm Surbhi, the CEO and co-founder of Symbl. At Symbl, we are building an API platform that can analyze voice conversations between natural human interactions, whether they are sales calls, the one that we are having right now, or at different places all over Zooms of the world that you guys are at. And basically, building a contextual conversation understanding system that can enable generating actionable insights from huge amounts of unstructured conversation data. And that's pretty much the voice intelligence work that we come on the front. So once humans actually start talking amongst each other is when we start playing in the whole ecosystem. So yeah, that's my two cents about what work we're doing.
Okay. And Surbhi, would you please tell us where your company is located other than the current remote work life?
Yeah, sure. We're based in Seattle, spread across both India and Seattle, so distributed team. And I can say sunny Seattle, at least today, and for a few more days.
Yeah. Thank you. So, Joan, would you tell us a little bit about Women in Voice and what voice technologies mean for your company?
Sure. So Women in Voice is the national or international nonprofit that works on, women and gender empowerment in the voice tech field. So we think of ourselves as like the women who code for voice. And I have a whole team behind me. I'm the CEO and founder. We have 15 chapters in 9 countries right now, and I think 4 in beta. So be prepared. What do I want to say about it? I mean, it's a community. Like what does voice tech mean for us? I think Surbhi mentioned some wonderful things about the voice field. A lot of people wonder, like, is it just Alexa? Like, are there even people in the voice field? Is it big enough to even have, women ecosystem? Just Amazon alone hires 10,000 people to work on the Alexa org, right? And that's just mostly here domestically in the United States. So it's a really big and vibrant ecosystem that's growing fast. And that's not only the audio, but also, as Surbhi mentioned, what we're getting in, the speech input, and how we're using natural language processing and AI on the back end to really inform what virtual agents that you interact with and implicit ones on the back end are working on as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Joan. Yeah, I recently joined your Slack channel, and I was amazed to see how many amazing communities are. So many amazing women are part of that community. So I was pretty surprised because a few years ago I was also only limited to all I knew was Alexa or sometimes Google Assistant and stuff like that. So I was pretty amazed. So thank you for that, and we will move on to you, Milkana.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm Milkana Brace, co-founder and CEO of Jargon. We are also a Seattle-based company, and we develop tools that teams that are building on top of these voice technologies can take advantage of. So we believe this new medium of voice and conversational AI is a challenging medium, and it takes a team sport to develop really good applications. So you need to have a designer, a writer, you need to have a developer. It really takes the team to build a great application. And so we have developed the tools that those teams use to then build great user experiences.
Okay, thank you so much on that, Milkana. And so with that, we will be moving on to our questions. So I will ask the question, and then we will go in the round robin fashion where I will ask Surbhi, and then Joan, and then Milkana. So my first question for you is, so let's discuss pre-COVID and post-COVID with business changes in the voice intelligence field. What are the trends you see now that are accelerating in your business? Please give us an example of a trend that never existed pre-COVID, what it does now.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone's aware about how healthcare and digital and education have completely pivoted from being in person to now remote, and folks with kids are going crazy in order to support homeschooling, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to it. But apart from that, I think, so what we do basically is apply our technology, speech recognition, NLP, and other context understanding pieces on top of voice, video, or even text communications. And as we had started the company, I mean, it was pretty much on a core hypothesis that at a certain period of time, most of the products, the B2B SaaS products which are getting built, will always have a communication component in it. And it was not so much until COVID hit where we actually saw like a rapid increase in that adoption of API platforms like Twilio, Agora, which have massively increased the number of products that integrations are built with. And for us as a business, it was very interesting to see that companies are not just looking to add communications in their tools, but now they are looking to add intelligent communication. So where communications was always like step one, now step one is all communications will not be sufficient because we want to know what our customers are really talking. How do we understand those consumer insights? How do we convert the customer conversations into growth opportunities for the business and deliver higher productivity out of meeting fatigues, out of sales call fatigues, out of like support, having digital customer support centers. So it's very interesting to see that change of, I would say, trend where now out of the box businesses are thinking about adding intelligent communications directly to their products. So that's been super exciting, and obviously being able to support some of the very mission critical use cases in healthcare and for distance learning has been very exciting. So yeah, that's pretty much.
Sure. Yeah, I am also loving my doctor's appointment that I moved over to Zoom now, so I don't have to actually go into the office and sit there and wait. So thank you so much for that insight. Joan, please go ahead, continue with the trends that you're seeing now.
Definitely. I think healthcare and education, as were just mentioned, are super big ones. I mean, I certainly see with voice, I think pre-COVID, there was kind of a game, kind of playful, let's make an Alexa skill, let's look at this Google action. And I think now there's far more practicalities in, as you mentioned, Twilio, but like cutting down costs, like contact centers blowing up, FAQs about when can I get my, refund from my plane ticket, all these kind of things. Are just creating escalations and lots of cost things. So as far as traditional IVRs and kind of omni-channel with voice is a new test case that people are, I actively see hiring for. If you're on Women of Voice, you see lots of job ads go up and down. And so people are thinking about, okay, if we were to cut this down, I talked about like cut it down 10 to 15% on some of your costs. Like how many Teslas could that translate into? And so people are really thinking about proactive usage of AI technologies in this way.
Sure. And
yeah, I agree with what was shared. And I would say that in general, COVID has had a different effect on technologies based on where in their development and adoption cycles they were when COVID hit. So technologies that were a little bit more mature and already had some of the kinks worked out got accelerated. The adoption of those got accelerated. And I think chatbots is a really perfect example of that. We've seen like a huge acceleration of conversational AI experiences built on chatbots. But projects that were more experimental in nature and still earlier on and part of innovation labs and groups, more kind of still working out the basics, like those actually, we saw a freeze on those. So I would say it's a very uneven impact that COVID has had on voice technologies. In some cases, like really propelled them forward, and in some cases it has stalled them. And I think it has to do with like, where's the budget coming from, and is the business case really proven? So if the budget is coming from, as Joan was saying, customer support, for example, where you're really looking to bring in efficiencies or scale, now that there's more of that customer support happening through digital channels, then we saw a massive acceleration. But if the budget and the scope of the project came from more kind of the innovation labs and experimental groups, then that got frozen. So very uneven. Quite interesting to observe.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Milkana, that how you shed some light on the uneven impact across the entire field. So with that, let's move on to our next question. So what are the AI tools, services, or capabilities you work with? We'll start with you, Surbhi.
Yeah, mostly everything that we usually build, because we are a platform company, so most of the stuff that we have built is ground up. We do always are agnostic to speech recognition, so we work with a lot of those tools in terms of Google, Amazon, Microsoft, even startups like DeepGram, Symbl AI. Like these are like really good speech recognition systems available that suits, like, because one size doesn't fit all of the companies, and it's always like depends upon the business. So that's been pretty interesting to not just for our application, but also see the shift in the kind of like on-prem deployments or super customization and things like that, which is happening on the business side. In addition to that, we use some of the open source frameworks, TensorFlow frameworks for developing our models, BERT and stuff like that. So that's something which has been using. But from a tools standpoint, it's mainly like a build ground up that we've done. So yeah, speech recognition, I would say, is kind of like the closest that we always monitor.
Yep. And if I'm next, I think thinking about tooling, just thinking about those people who might be listening who are not in the voice field or conversational space, really thinking about how you design architectures, right? There's like companies like VoiceFlow where you can visualize, or Lucid Chart, where the user is going to be going in the flow. Thinking about the backend, like automatic speech recognition. Are you using like a Google API? What kind of things are listening to your input? I'll just give a brief example of people, like things you could test out today other than the products that are on this call. But like my dad he has huge hands and he's terrible at typing. And the other day I was like, will you please try out Google Voice typing? Like I've asked him like 5 times to try this. Cause of course, like I want to see a late adopter, a super late adopter, and his response to some of the tech that I, work on, not Google today. But if anyone uses Google Docs today, you can dictate, you can Google Voice type with the Google API into Google Docs. You can find it, but really thinking about flexibility and using it in different browsers. I think that's a beta for Gmail, honestly, as they build that out very, 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 very slowly, but also the languages that are supported in different ways of thinking about tooling. So I play with almost anything these days and just see where they're at. But I think customizability, and I agree with Surbhi, kind of being agnostic to learning what pieces fit together to make the best products.
So Jargon is a tooling company. We build tools for teams that are building voice applications, and we currently support 4 platforms. So Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, Jovo, which is a framework that supports several different channels, including Amazon, Google, and Chat, as well as Rasa. Those are the 4 applications 4 platforms that we support, we extend to.
Okay, so what are some of the challenges in the existing toolkits for businesses and developers that you see?
Milkana, maybe you can shed some more light there.
Sure. We see a lot of challenges, and I would say some of the challenges are related not even so much to the tools, but to the fact that there are no clear roles and responsibilities, and businesses don't yet know what it takes to develop a conversational end-to-end experience. As I mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, we very much believe that conversational experiences are a team sport, and it really requires the expertise of people who are professionals at what they do. So designers, writers, developers, all of them, product managers, all of them working together in order to create really compelling experiences. And I think in many enterprises, companies, teams are still trying to figure out, like, how do you staff a voice team, or how do you staff a conversational team? Oftentimes they would start with a developer who would single-handedly put together some basic experience, and then that works, but usually it's not as rich or as user-friendly or as doesn't have like the proven ROI or whatever the case might be, than if you had an entire team with a multidisciplinary team working on it. So I think the tools always follow the needs of the teams. And I think the very first step that needs to be figured out is businesses actually thinking holistically about the skill set that it takes to build applications. Now, that said, there are already, in kind of the broader conversational and voice space, there are a number of tool providers. In addition to Jargon, we focus primarily on the content management side of things. There are several design tools. Joan mentioned VoiceFlow earlier. There's also BotMock. There's Bot Society. There's several other tools that are in the space. And I would say we all cover parts of the end-to-end solution. And I think that as the industry evolves, I very much hope that we move to a best-of-breed approach where you really have specialty tools for design, specialty tools for content management, specialty tools for NLU, like as opposed to having one platform or one toolkit being able to do everything end to end. Because when you take that latter approach, you end up with very simplistic solutions. But in a best of breed approach, you can build far more advanced solutions. So I very much hope that that's the direction we're evolving in.
Yeah, I've also seen like gathering data, labeling, annotation. It's kind of like still such a big unsolved problem. Like so many, I think everyone's working towards finding the most optimal process also in defining in addition to the tools. So I think like you were saying, Milkana, it's a combination of theme, processes, tools, and like, data labeling, annotation, gathering for intent identification systems. I think it still remains like super challenging for companies to build. We've seen like lead times of like 8 to 9 months before actually a business or a developer can take a product out to a beta before actually getting some valuable end user feedback, and they would end up spending that time actually building the backend systems. So that's been also interesting to actually see.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a technical advisor for a healthcare company, and like they have 7-year product cycles. Wow. Right. So really like thinking of what do they want to be putting onto the market in like 7 to 9 years. Like it's a different time scale from ours. So like every quarter. I agree with all that's been said, but also I really think about the two buckets of kind of the strategy and the execution, and the strategy being the vision and where you want to be headed and what kind of products and what that ROI might look like. And then the execution being like, who is implementing this, right? Who is the developer or the designer building out the product? Are you paying someone else to do it? Really those why we're headed in a direction and who is going to make it happen as being the two really big things right now. And I think neither of them are solved. And just really being clear though, because I see a lot of people floundering or being very unsure of all those answers, and at least having an answer today as that evolves tomorrow.
Thank you for all those insights. I think that was great information. So my next question is around cybersecurity. I am very passionate, and when it comes to AI, I always have so many questions and security. So my question for you three is when collecting data or building machine learning capabilities for voice intelligence, how do you stay compliant with the security regulations?
That's right up Surbhi's alley.
Sensitive topic. But I think when we started the company, it was kind of the first thing that we did, like spend 2 months in figuring out the right foundation, which will help us scale beyond. A couple of practices that I can mention is we implemented data layer protection early on within all our machine learning models, making sure that we mask all the PII data. We make sure that we're not using the PII data in training of those models. If whenever we are using like Ensemble or various WebSocket based integrations are anyway pretty secure. So like I think there are two parts in which security makes like really important aspect for us. One of them is making sure that our machine learning models are secure enough not to use any PII data. The other layer is really that the exchange of voice information or voice audio that happens from an end customer to our cloud platform happens over a secure and encrypted channel. And then the third is really like the retention and data logging part of it. So we've also seen like now when we work with, for example, fintech companies or businesses which are have really big concerns around storing or retaining data. So getting an option and offering a capability of no data logging for customers, where we are now developing like a transfer learning based approach at the end customer's premise or private cloud, in a way that on our base models that we train, their additional delta gets applied within their cloud premise without them having to send their data off to our cloud platforms. That's also something that we're doing right now. So I think these are kind of the 2-3 ways in which we are trying to solve the problem from several angles. And obviously, like data is kind of the king to learn patterns, and no matter, and I think it's also like a give and take relationship. You need to trust and make sure that, you know, open up your systems and say, this is all our compliances that we support today. This is all our encryption algorithms that we use. And we've seen early on, like customers being really super friendly on that terms and like looking at it and say, okay, this architecture makes sense for us, and, you know, go ahead and deploy this at our end. So yeah, those are kind of, I think, the practical learnings that we've had so far over the last 2 years.
Okay. And I take it that your company also keep in mind any upcoming regulations or some recent changes as well. Like we just had a CCPA. Yeah. I mean, it's not super recent, but it's still, you know, one of those things that just they change the way we get the data, or they put a lot more stricter regulations. So then we kind of have to go back and see what we're doing and how we change that to meet those regulations.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think any startup that basically works in a B2B model or like serving the businesses, they have to adopt to all these different regulations early on in their life cycle. Like there's no choice, like you just have to do it. So I think it's also good to set the right foundation of the company early on, such that scalability is an easier problem. So sure.
Sure. And Joan and Milkana, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, I mean, what an informed answer from a CEO. Isn't that what you want to hear? Like, I really think voice data is so rich And I think all of the people on this call know that, but it's, I think, a really important foray. I think when I get this question, often it's like, oh, is Alexa like taking my data? What are they doing with my data? Is the question I get at dinner parties like all the time, when there were dinner parties. And I really think what I usually push back at is thinking like, yes, we need to think about data security. We need to think about privacy, all these different things, especially with sensitive populations. Or are you recording child speech? Right? What kind of protections might be on that? But also pushing people to say, you know, privacy in the way you conceive of it, like died in the early 2000s, you know, like really thinking of what our data is, what is free, you know, how we give away our data so readily today, and being thoughtful of what that means into the future. So, you know, don't hate on voice tech, but really, I think thinking about data privacy, I know teams at Microsoft that they could build multiple things, but because of GDPR, they choose to build one that is compliant. Thinking about many different products, not just voice ones. So I think that's opening our mindset to what data will be in the future and how AI is conceived of.
Sure. Thank you for that detailed answer. So with that, let's move on to
Wait, I want to hear from Milkana. I'd like to hear her answer.
Oh, well, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. It would have been perfectly fine to move on, because actually the layer at which we operate, we don't need to have direct access to the user raw input. And so we basically strip out any PII that might be, because it's not relevant to us. So someone's credit card or phone number or even private name does not actually impact any of the layer that we operate with. So we actually don't want to see that information. So because of that, I don't have like great insights to add other than what was already discussed. Certainly, as far as ensuring the security of our tools, and if they are on-prem, like meeting all the security requirements from the customer, like all of that is like basic software requirements. So not really related to voice tech per se.
Sure. Thank you. All right, so I think we touched a lot on how voice intelligence is changing right now with the current situation. So my question for you is, we all kind of know that voice intelligence is kind of new, but it is accelerating. What do you think the future of voice intelligence is? For example, how is it going to change the way our day-to-day tasks and the way we work over, let's say, next 2 to 5 years?
I think you're on mute, Surbhi.
Sorry. Yeah, I think I can quickly give some thoughts and probably you guys can jump in. So I'm super fascinated just looking at the new type of workplaces which are being designed now at home for multiple people, considering that it's all going to be remote. So I'm sure companies had like a long roadmap to achieve, and it was all focused to in-room systems, in meeting room systems, or in workplaces like offices. And now they're all shifting to like independent workstations at home. So it's really interesting to kind of like see the changes in the roadmap, which will need to be adapted to suit such a new environment. But definitely, I think it's also a lot of marrying the existing technologies and forefronts. Like, how do you marry chatbots with the human-to-human interactions? And how do you marry vision and voice and vision and video with the conversational data? So a lot of like marrying all the different technologies that exist and creating a unified user experience, which is kind of like multimodal and multi-channel, making sure that there's like a contextual flow of information through different interfaces. I'm like absolutely fascinated by what's to come. So yeah.
I completely agree. Multimodal is absolutely the way things are shaping out to be. And also, I would say kind of ambient experiences, right? Meaning that you can seamlessly work from home, be on the go, in your car, on your phone, on your watch, and have interaction with these different technologies in a very seamless way. And your experience is personalized based on not only who you are, but the context in which you are in. And so if you have a screen, maybe you experience these conversational applications through a combination of visuals, either images or videos as well as voice. But when you're on the go, a video or even an image might be too distracting. And so the content is packaged in a different way so that you hear only the essence of what you're supposed to know without without that visual aid. So kind of targeting the experience to be based on not only who you are, but the context and the device you're using, I think is absolutely the way of the future. So I think there's going to be a lot of innovation in that realm. And if you think about a lot of the experiences we have in voice today, they're kind of like glorified phone trees, you know, for customer service, press 1, for sales, press 2, and maybe a couple of turns past that. They're very, very, very basic. But the promise of conversational AI is such that a user can take a conversation in any direction they want without following a prescribed path. And to me, that's very exciting. And I think it's very much within reach. I think we'll see that in the next couple of years, like truly rich conversational experiences, which can be used for personal, consumer type applications, as well as very much business applications. Joan?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I love the multimodal discussion. I think my summary would be about kind of integrated as well as personalized, as you mentioned with ambient computing and it knowing where you are, no matter which device you're interacting with. You shouldn't have to re-authenticate every time. But that integrated approach, I definitely see a world when we're thinking about multimodal, if people on this call are not as familiar with that word, really thinking about different inputs and outputs and having a user experience that matches what that is about. So if it's IoT, right, is that maximized for fitness? But really, if all the inputs could be voice, if it's gesture, is it AR, right? Thinking about like you just want to hear an output that's yes, right? Like all these different ways that we're interacting with devices. I think will be very integrated, very multimodal. I mean, we see, Apple buying up how many different companies to make whatever AR glasses are coming next. So really thinking about leveraging those different components and pieces where voice will be a component of all those pieces.
So thank you so much for those great answers, great insights on the voice intelligence field. I think at this point, I can go through the questions in the chat from the audience. Please, this is just a reminder, if you have any questions during this session, please feel free to type them in the chat, and then we will try to do our best to answer them. So with that, our first question is from Moana. My apologies if I didn't pronounce that right. So Moana's question is, recently I've tried Dialogflow. When I test the agent, I have to slowly articulate my query. How do you bridge the gap between a developer's test and a real user's test while developing?
Data. I think it's about constant iteration, right? Like you think a user is going to interact with your system in one way. I think Raza has some great information about that. We're deploying as soon as you can and getting data and iterating fast. Deploy stupid, become intelligent is kind of that model. So I certainly would recommend that instead of making assumptions about what your users would do, putting something out there and getting data about how they do want to interact with your agent.
Sure. And Surbhi and Milkana, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think there are some good testing tools as well, which I don't know. I'm not like super familiar with the testing tools, but I think there are some testing tools that you can use to kind of like set that user tree for different variations. I don't know, Milkana, do you have any?
Yeah, I'm trying to actually decipher what specifically the question is. When Muna said that she has to slowly articulate the query, I wasn't sure if she was referring to the fact that like the voice input is actually being challenged, which to me sounds like actually a setup issue of how you've set up your Dialogflow test environment more so than anything else. You shouldn't be having that experience. So your experience in a testing environment should be the same as a user's environment. But I'm happy to try to help out offline.
Sure. Thank you so much. And our next question is from Glenda Anderson. So Glenda says, early voice systems were particularly poor at understanding female voices. Are more modern AI voice tools trained on a more diverse set of gender /ethnicities and /accents?
I'll happily take this one, as I have a Harvard Business Review article about this exact topic. And I love the positioning of early voice systems were particularly poor. That use of past tense is problematized by a lot of research. More modern tools are working. I mean, teams across the world are working on making more diverse data sets and how we build in general, especially right now in 2020. How could you not be thinking about that in some way? It's a really big problem, and it's exceptionally bad, especially not only because we're trying to make more diverse data sets, but the data sets we started with early adopters. So usually when I talk about what our data might look like is when you used to walk on a plane, and if you're sitting at row 54, way in the back of the plane, who do you see first? Who might be early adopters getting the tech first, the data we're provided with, onto the middle set of the data, and then at the end of the data, who is giving data. So thinking about the bulk of where white male data might be versus more diverse data. So it's a bigger problem than just the voices. There are problems with hardware, there are problems with software, there are problems with data sets. Definitely check out my article. I'd be happy to post it. But I would say the counterbalance point actually might be that we need more women and diverse people on teams who are creating these data sets, checking it with quality control and so forth. So still a big open question. And again, teams across companies are working on this.
All right, thank you so much, Joan. And let me see if there's any other questions in the chat that are coming up. Again, we still have some time, so please feel free to send us any questions. And thank you for posting that link to the article, Joan.
Sure thing.
All right, so I don't see any other questions coming up. I think at this time, this is going to be my favorite part of the session where, like, as you know, I was one of those people where I didn't have enough knowledge about voice technologies or the entire field. So the closing session where we talked about the call to action items is what I'm looking forward to as well. I think we had a question. Sorry, let me just get into that so we can, before we get into our call to action items. Okay, so the question is from Anna. How do you handle high expectations from users of your conversational AI?
It's always interesting to set expectations. I can talk a little bit about what we are seeing. So when we started the company, a very common use case that we kicked off our API platform was really generating meeting notes from meetings. And the expectation in the beginning was like, all right, so basically I don't have to take notes anymore once I start using the system. So it was, and we have been working in the conversational AI space where you, for virtual assistants and chatbots. So it was very interesting to see the different type of expectation setting that you got to do in every single conversational intelligence use cases. So, like for us right now, we try to set lower expectations when we talk to our customers, saying that this is not, you should just not compare it with another human. And until the time you do that, everything else works great. And it's a iterative learning system, so gets better with usage. So I think it's also a part of like early company sales cycle. How do you best align customer expectations so that when they first see the results, they're always delighted by it, but not like beating over it, something that we learned over a period of time. So yeah, just making sure that it's realistic outputs. You're not comparing it with a human for understanding basis, and use it as an augmentation system or a recommendation system, as opposed to being like a direct, you do this or do that, like abstract. So that's, always using a recommendation system as like a word has helped us to kind of get around that.
I think that's a really good question. And unfortunately, when kind of voice applications first became exposed to consumers was through Alexa, right? And Google Assistant. But let's say on Alexa, the domain is just so broad. And so it kind of sets the expectation that you can ask Alexa about everything and anything, and she should know how to handle that conversation. And that is a very, very high and completely unrealistic bar, right? And so I think where you're much more likely to succeed is when you define the scope to be far, far, far more narrow. So you can have better training data, so you can design your application better, so you can like really understand the user and their expectations and kind of meet those. So I think how you handle high expectations is that by scoping down what your application actually does, either to a small set of scenarios or to a certain set of users, and then really nailing that and building from there, as opposed to saying it does everything, which unfortunately, like a general purpose conversational AI is probably a number of years away for it to be really, really smart and really, really good. So scope it down.
Absolutely. I agree with all those answers. And I think some of my favorite pieces of this just in the user flow is to actually have recoveries that say, instead of just like, oops, I didn't understand you. Oops, I didn't understand you. Be like, hey, I'm still learning. Like, could you have some patience with me? And then finally, you know, like in those recoveries, like, were you thinking about this, or can I help you? You know what I mean? Like really giving them different options instead of continually making the same mistake. To have graceful recoveries, I think is a really, really smart and important piece of conversational design.
Yeah, I think user experience has been kind of the key unsolved, I would say, in order to scale voice intelligence. Like scaling user experience for voice interfaces is kind of the core and center of the entire product development lifecycle. And like honestly, like in early on when you're building a product, you would not think about emphasizing that much of an experience unless like it's really known and it's something which you are really consciously thinking about. And I think that's something that we all have to start consciously thinking about in terms of making sure that technology is great, but without a great user experience, it is not going to go through the right feedback loop, expectation setting, all of that aspects.
Yeah, and if I could just dovetail, I think that's when we're talking about, you know, people trying things out and like adoption and retention of products. I really see that as a key differentiator for the user experience. My friend is in India and he tries out like all of them. He buys all the IoT and has so much fun. Good for him. And he was telling me about comparing different Amazon and Google products. And he's like, I don't know how I can define it, but I'm way more comfortable using this product. And I struggle with this other product, which makes me want to use this one product again and again. And, you know, he gets to test out different things. So I think really thinking about on a global scale, that comfort, those things that seem small, but end up being really important differentiators.
We can move on to our call to action items. If not, then I can always switch back, and even if there are questions coming until the end. And one thing I would want us to make sure that is that we can, if it would help, we can share the links of the website like Symbl AI, Surbhi's company, and Women in Voice from Joan and Milkana Brace's jargon.com. I think we can share those links. So you'll have an opportunity to check out all the great work they're doing, and feel free to check those out. And so with that, let's get into our thank you for, I think I noticed some links being shared in the chat from Milkana and Joan. Thank you so much for doing that. Okay, another question from Glenda, actually. So deep learning, so deep neural net algorithms have proven strong in image handling. Are they also proving superior in voice?
They're certainly helping things. I think a question I get very often is about the evolution of our field, or like voice AI is so new, except that we've been working on it since like the 70s and 80s. And like, why now is a question I get very often. And I think the answer usually lies related to neural nets in, you know, we have machine learning, like the pattern recognition. We have computing power, like we can compute things so much faster than we ever could before. So it seems almost instantaneous. And the last piece is just big data. Like imagine what Google has in the back end, right? So really thinking about those three pieces, really iterate how much better we can be. But going back to if your data set is wildly biased, for example, if you check out my paper, there are many other ones that show like potentially 70% like homogenous voices and 30% everybody else. And so really thinking about how that skews what word error rate, which people are mentioning, is one of the ways we calculate accuracy for all voice systems for automatic speech recognition.
Okay, thank you so much, Joan, for that answer. Our next question is from Mai Novak. My apologies if I didn't pronounce your name correctly. So your question is, conversational voice AI and ethics. Will we allow a smart speaker to give us personal advice, or a smart speaker boss give us a work task, or supervise our children or elder parents?
I hope so. That is my answer. And the way I think about it is that we have, since the dawn of humanity, created tools to help ourselves, right? We have created tools to process our food and to capture our thoughts by writing or drawing, and of course, more and more advanced technology tools. But they're all there to help our lives and to make our lives better. And just like today, my calendar manages my day, I certainly hope an AI assistant will actually make recommendations as to how I can be spending my time, not just telling me that I have an appointment, but even suggesting that I might skip out on that because there's something else I should be paying attention to. So I really hope that the conversational AI experiences become so sophisticated and so helpful that we seek them out and we really use them as tools. So I definitely see the world in a very positive light. There's certainly hurdles that we need to overcome and kind of danger zones that we need to avoid with biases and kind of manipulation and all that. But I definitely see a world where all of the tooling that we've created up to this point has been useful, and that can continue to be the case at just more advanced levels.
I definitely agree with that. And I think a specific example is with the mental health space. As Surbhi mentioned at the top of this, like healthcare is booming right now and really thinking about the future of healthcare. And I've seen more and more conversational apps for anxiety, all kinds of depression, etc. And I think the supply and demand of therapy and how to get different resources depending on where you are in the world for mental health. I've seen some really cool behavioral, I think CBDD? I'm not a healthcare professional, but the way we can really get different access to people and sophisticated help for different problems. That's just one example of ways that conversational AI, I think, can do amazing things in the future, hopefully. I think you also mentioned ethics, and just like, we hope that any tech we make, right, has some ethical or moral compass that, of course, is created by humans in general. Surbhi?
Yeah, I think it's also awareness. All those points, and then also being consciously aware about the fact to think about fairness, trust, ethics into anything that we do day to day. Sometimes it's just so, you get so biased towards like what you're working heads on into their own world that sometimes you forget about the bigger picture. So candidly acknowledging, and I think it's every startup's like responsibility as more companies are getting built, so to be able to stick to their guns to some of the core foundations where their business stands. And I think if we continue to do that, we'll build the products of future that is going to help us rather than not help us. So yeah.
So my question to you is, as Joan also mentioned, that voice intelligence is also new, but we have been doing the work on it for decades now. So the businesses that are just starting out with this in this field, what are some of your call to action that you would want to mention here for businesses, how they should get started with using the right voice technologies for their businesses? So basically, how should the businesses get started with choosing or and end up using the right voice technologies for them?
Yeah, I can quickly start to give some background on it. I think there's a lot of discussion that happens whenever you build a voice tech, whether you should build it internally, partner with a company, or kind of like use off-the-shelf products. And that's, I think, the first decision that every business ends up making. And it depends upon several factors, whether is this voice intelligence mainstream in your business, or is it like one of the capabilities that you want to provide the user? What is the go-to-market timeline? Do you want to go to market immediately, or is it a futuristic roadmap to accomplish in 9 to 10 months? How important is having the IP within your own organization, or is it okay to just use, like, let's say, some off-the-shelf sentiment API integrated into your workflow and provide the capability. So is it a mission critical application, or is it like a good to have? So I think there are several factors around it which enables businesses now to make decisions based on that fact. And I would, just based on what we have seen, we always recommend early businesses to get started with very small use cases where you then try to give users like just moments of delight within their own workflows and experience. So for example, if I'm talking on this meeting, I would love to get some nudge and notifications on something that I'm probably missing at, or probably can follow a post. But it's really like not obviously narrowing, like Milkana was also saying, like narrowing the use case, but really identifying that how can it be embedded in what you do today without changing the user behavior. So that's something that is really helpful to get started on small scale.
Sure. Milkana, and would you like to add to that?
Sure. Yeah, I would say the first thing that business teams need to do is come up with a charter or really a very clear document that summarizes what they're hoping to do from a user's perspective. So it's not about kind of technology exploration, which has its merits as well, but it's really to serve their end user, their customer. And I agree with everything that Surbhi said. Starting small, like really understanding the requirements is critical. As I mentioned earlier, I think that as the industry matures, and it is already happening, we'll end up with a best of breed solution where you have specialized tools to handle specialized parts of these end-to-end voice solutions. And so I would encourage teams to really start thinking about who are the winners or who are the leading technologies based on the problem that they're looking to solve, and stitching those solutions together.
Yeah, I don't know that I have much more to add than what's been said on these topics, but I would think alignment, and I think going back to that kind of strategy and execution of starting small, and what are we going to take a bite into, and who is going to execute that, and how is it going to be executed, and with which tools, right? As was mentioned previously. Yeah.
Sure. All right. Thank you for all those great answers. And we have about 5 minutes left, and I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. So I think it's about time we can wrap up. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to thank everyone, the Women in AI organizers and the audience, and Joan, Surbhi, and Milkana for making time to be here with us. It was a super exciting and really informative event. With that, I will pass on to you for any final things that you would like to add, and we will end the session for the next, I think, panel.
Thank you, Jaspreet. Yeah, great being here. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and happy to continue the conversation offline on LinkedIn or email. Thank you.
Sure.
Absolutely. Well, and just last note, as the CEO and founder of Women in Voice, I'd be remiss in not saying that if you are in voice or interested in getting into voice, and you identify as a woman or gender minority, please join us. As Surbhi mentioned, or Jaspreet mentioned, we have a super active Slack, LinkedIn, Twitter. My team is launching our Instagram, YouTube. Like we're everywhere. Find out the chapter near you. Again, it's womeninvoice.org, and we would love to have you.
Yeah, and like I said, I did scroll through it just the other day, and I was like, wow, a lot of participants, a lot of great information on there. So
and jobs too. We have a whole jobs channel that blows up regularly with our LinkedIn. So if you are currently looking for a job or pivoting or etc., strongly recommend. Come check us out.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.